Well, it looks like we're at a pin, so if you didn't have a pin, just share with your neighbor. And if you don't have a neighbor, I don't know what to tell you. All right, so we're going to start out with a prayer because Lord knows I need it. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us be here tonight. God, I pray that I'll be able to speak this message clearly to the journey and that people will be able to take something away from this. And pray this in your name. Amen. Okay, so today we'll be reading in First Chronicles chapter 21. So if you want to go ahead and start flipping to that page. If you don't have a Bible yet, go get a Bible. If you don't know what part of the Bible we're on, it's right on the screen also. Oh. Wow, I was expecting like the journey to be like a little bit better than the fuel. I'm just joking. You guys hear that every week. I know that because I record the videos and I hear them say it every week. So if you don't know, my name's Malik. Hi. Hi. I go to college at UMKC, studying for communications with a film and media emphasis. I'm a junior there. I work at a music store called Music and Arts. It's basically my life is school and work and then church. So what more could you ask for, really? How many times a day do you use the word my? I want you to think about that for a little bit. Because like think about it in your life, you're like, my life, my friends, my car, my TV, my phone, my time, my money. Like think about how many times in a day you probably use the word my when you're describing something. It's a lot. I know for me personally. So when we're doing this, we're actually taking ownership of things that belong to God, and taking credit for what God has done is a way to attract his opposition. So we'll start off in verse 1. Satan rose up against Israel and caused David to take a census of the people of Israel. So David said to Joab and the commander of the army, take a census of all the people of Israel, from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north, and bring me a report so I may know how many there are. But Joab replied, may the Lord increase the number of his people 100 times over. But why, my lord the king, do you want to do this? Are they not all your servants? Why must you cause Israel to sin? But the king insisted that they take the census. So Joab traveled throughout all of Israel to count the people. Then he returned to Jerusalem and reported the number of people to David. There was 1,100,000 warriors that could in all of Israel who could handle a sword, and 470,000 in Judah. But Joab did not include the tribes of Levi and Benjamin in the census because he was so distressed at what the king made him do. So once again, like before a couple weeks ago when we heard about David and Bathsheba, David was given an opportunity and had God put someone in his life where they were able to warn him, and once again, he didn't listen to him. So this time it was Joab. Joab was like, are you sure you really want to do this? Like, can any of you guys think of a time where you're about to do something, you have your friend, and they're like, are you sure you really want to do this? So have you ever had a time in your life where someone gave you advice and you chose not to listen to their advice? Can we get a raise of hands? Have you ever had a time in your life where someone gave you advice and you didn't listen to the advice? I know that happens to me all the time. My mom was just here. I'm sure she'd say I do that like every day. So when you don't listen to someone else's advice and it like blows up in your face, like, do you have to deal with consequences? Yeah? What are they? Guilt, loss of friends, grounded, spankings, spankings in high school. All right. What else? What else can happen due to consequences? Dan, what about your work? What happens to people when they have consequences? What is it like when they have to deal with those consequences? Yeah, like, well, a little bit of both. So David had to face these consequences after ignoring Gad's warning from God. So verse 7. God was displeased with the census, and he punished Israel for it. Then David said to God, I have sinned greatly by taking the census. Please forgive my guilt for doing this foolish thing. So how many of you, after you figure out that was a bad decision, you're like, hey, mom, dad, you want to forgive me for this one? Like, I know I messed up, but can you forgive your son? Then the Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer. This was the message. Go and say to David, this is what the Lordship says. I will give you 3 choices, one of these punishments, and I will inflict it on you. So Gad came to David and said, these are the choices the Lord has given you. You may choose 3 years of famine, 3 months of destruction by the sword of your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague as the angel of the Lord brings devastation throughout the land of Israel. Decide what answer I should give the Lord who sent me. Yikes. When I first read that, I was like, looking at all 3 of the choices, I was like, I don't really know which one I would choose. If you want to go throw up those choices. So we have 3 years of famine, 3 months to be destroyed by your enemy, and then 3 days of severe plague. So, like, look at these and think, which one would you probably use? Which one would you probably choose? So I'm hearing some plague, some famine, 3 years? 3 years, 3 days? They're about the same, right? You got to eat? That's, yeah. What about 3 months to be destroyed by your enemy? No? You don't want... Why is that the worst one? 3 months of just waiting, checking off the calendar. They didn't even have calendars back then. I am in a desperate situation, David replied to Gad. But let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great. Do not let me fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 people died as a result. Once again, 70,000 people died because of one person's decision. Can you imagine having to deal with all that? Can you think of one of the times where you, in life, where you're like, you had to make a decision and it blew up, and as that, for a result, ends up with 70,000 people dying? Yikes. The Lord was willing to forgive David as he asked, but he still punished him for his sin. So 4 reasons for the punishment. 1, it humbles him because he had to look at all the penalties and then choose one. And then 2, it was a consequence of his pride. So God makes him choose out of the 3 options. And this is one of the only times in the Bible where God gives out multiple options for someone's punishment. And then 3, he had to help him endure the punishment because he had to choose the punishment. Have any of you ever had a time where you got in trouble and your parents made you choose what your consequence was? I know I have. Don't those punishments usually end up being worse? And the worst part is that you chose it and not them. So it's like they probably were thinking something a little bit less, and then you just punish yourself twice as much as they are expecting. And then the last one was to make David consider what he did. So because of his actions, 70,000 people died. So let's go to verse 15. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But just as the angel was preparing to destroy it, the Lord relented and said to the deaf angel, "Stop, that is enough." At that moment, the angel of the Lord was standing by the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with his sword drawn, reaching out over Jerusalem. When I read that the first time, I was like, I cannot imagine having to sit there and you look up to the sky and you're like, I caused that. So David and the leaders of Israel put on a burlap to show their deep distress and fell face down onto the ground. And David said to God, "I am the one who called for the census. I am the one who has sinned and done wrong. But these people are innocent as sheep. What have they done? O Lord my God, let your anger fall against me and my family, but do not destroy your people." So David understood that the whole community would be punished for his sin, and his selfishness and claim to what wasn't his would hurt them all. And if you look at verse 17, it changes. David, after realizing what he did, he goes and he says, "Your people" now, instead of "the people" or "my people." Which this is showing how David learned from his mistake in the past of counting what was really God's. So just like David, we often think we have it all together and we forget that we need to keep God's will ahead of our own. The good news is that God is always with us, though that doesn't stop us from experiencing the consequences of our sin. So if you haven't been paying attention or you're confused, here's what I want you to get out of this. Unchecked pride will cause you to sin. Don't forget the source of your blessing, and then listen to the advice of others. So as you go on later in the week, obviously you can go back and reread through this if it doesn't make sense, because I know if you just read it for the first time, you're probably wondering, why did this happen? Why did this happen? I challenge you really to go back and kind of look over what was talking about, or if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time, so ask your leaders in groups. And then as far as application for the week, try to think of times where you just need to listen to wise counsel before you go make a decision. I know we got some seniors in here. You're about to make some crazy decisions. You probably should listen to some wise counsel before you go do it. So yeah, that's all I got today. Yeah.